Hey guys, we're back with another episode of Studio Nights, and today we're here with Peter Hall. Welcome, Pete.
Hello, nice to be here.
So for our listeners, Pete was one of our professors in our Global Approaches class in the summer of 2025, and he's currently working at Little as studio principal, and he really focuses on sustainable design initiatives and is an advocate for regenerative design as well as mass timber, correct?
That is correct, and it makes me sound really important, so thank you, yeah.
So we did have conversations with you about, you told us that you were born in the UK, and we really want to know kind of how is that life over there, over at the UK?
How is life in the UK?
Yeah.
So I grew up in a small town, town called Rugby, where the game of rugby was invented, incidentally. Yeah. It's not the history and the culture is kind of lost on most people in Rugby, but it's a nice little town, very sort of typical sort of small town in the middle of the country. And growing up, I think it's probably tougher than you might think. You kind of, I think when I talk to maybe Americans, and when they think about England, they think about this beautiful, quintessential, idyllic place, and in some ways it is, but it's not always as easy and as idyllic as that. So what I say is it can be a tough place to grow up sometimes, but the town, everybody knows each other, it's very tight. You kind of go out on a Friday, Saturday night and everybody knows each other, and that could be good, that could be bad. But ultimately I always knew that I wanted to kind of get out of the town. And so I went up to a city called Leeds for university. And I think if you're familiar, it's up in the north. It's one of the old industrial textile towns. And it's just a very, very cool cosmopolitan place. So once I got to a place like that, I kind of really found myself. And so that's, I think, ultimately is what really shaped me and the person I am today, is that my experience up in Leeds. And ultimately that kind of led me to moving to London with the company I was working for. And so that, again, London's an amazing city, but that's ultimately where I met my wife. So it's kind of ultimately why I'm here. She's from Florida, born in Ohio, like a lot of people from Florida.
Wow.
But yeah, so I don't know. I love going back. Happy to be here. I've been here for 13 years.
Wow.
Can't complain really.
So your wife is from Florida and she was living in London.
Yeah, she was studying abroad. So last semester she went to Rollins College locally, and her last semester was sort of wrapping up, and it happened to be in London. And we met after about 2 weeks, I think, of her being there, and one thing led to another. And she came back and did a master's degree in London, and so I kind of joked, she got homesick for like a week, and I was like, I'd move to Florida. By that point, we'd visited a lot and things like that, and I have a lot of family in New York, and so I've always sort of spent a lot of time in Manhattan, and I was convinced from like the age of 15, I almost didn't go to college in Leeds, so I was like convinced I was going to go to New York and live with my aunt. My dad was like, look, just come back, do your degree, get your undergrad, and then you can do whatever you want. I'm like, okay, cool. So anyway, so I didn't meet my wife. A couple of years after that, it was like, yeah, I'm ready for a change. I feel good about it. I've always been intrigued by the United States and what it offers and things. So it was a relatively easy decision in the end. But and being from England, the weather tends to be much maligned, and and so the idea of just coming to somewhere where the sun is out all the time and the heat, and it's just, I mean, it's cliche, but it's an amazing experience living in Florida relative to living in the cold, dark, grey middle of England. But
so do you think, because I know you mentioned to us before that you didn't start with architecture, correct? You started with civil engineering, and that kind of grew over there in the UK. But when you came to the US, was living in the UK anything had to influence your path in architecture, or you kind of found that like later when you came to the US? Or
good question. I think when we talk about being shaped, you don't realize you're being shaped, do you? When you're young, you just are, and you don't know really what you're being shaped for. And I've often sort of thought about that. I always wanted to be an architect. So when I was 14, 15, I used to draw. I used to like art, was my favorite subject. My dad was a math teacher, and he was convinced I should be an engineer. So I'm like, okay, well, all right, fine, I'll focus in math class, or maths class, as I should say. And it was, I realized I wasn't great at maths. It wasn't bad. I could hold my own, but I was more focused on design, technology, woodworking, being with my hands, and then drawing and art in general. Maths was the really good counterbalance to that. So when you're applying to university courses in England, you really have to make a decision when you're about 15 years old, because in England you reduce your subjects after you get to 16 years old. So you're always kind of focusing more and more and more. And so by the time you get to university, it's really focused. Okay. So in my case, it was architectural engineering. I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to go and get my architecture degree, but it's a 7-year process thing. And so I'm like, that's a long time for a 15-year-old or 16-year-old to try and make that call. So I thought a 3-year bachelor's in architectural engineering, perfect compromise. So I went up to Leeds. I realized that the City of Leeds had a lot more to offer than me than the civil engineering building. But, I did the degree. I got a lot out of the degree. Met a lot of great people. Loved every minute in some ways, but I knew pretty quickly I wasn't going to be an engineer. So when I graduated, I just wanted to take it easy for a little while so I could figure out what that next move was. And I basically ended up falling into bar restaurant management. And I did that basically through my 20s in England. Ran a bar in Leeds, so the same city I was in college. I was there for another 3 years after college. And then the company moved me down to London, take over a site down there that was struggling. And so that, talking about being shaped, I mean, that really has shaped almost my architecture career today. I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but the idea of like, really all I did was manage people. And so we forget sometimes that it doesn't matter what career you're in, we're just together, we're people, we're managing people, we're working with teams. And so that shaped me, especially moved to London where I had to really experience lots of different nationalities. I was the only English guy on my team in a bar in the middle of London. So it was interesting. It just kind of gave me a big platform to move on from there. And so when I moved to the US, it was like, well, do I want to continue to do that, or should I maybe use this as a fresh start, go back to what I wanted to do originally, which was architecture. And so I ended up. I can tell a funny story. Can I tell a funny story?
Of course.
It's about a urinal, or a urinal, as you'd say here.
Oh,
Is that okay? Can I talk about urinals?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I got my green card, I bartended in a place called Santiago's Bodega.
Oh, I know that place.
Great place. So they were opening when I got my green card. I was having a drink at the Matador, which is the bar next door, and I was like, look, I've just got my green card. I'm intrigued by the industry here. Do you guys have any vacancies? And they said, no, but the restaurant is going to be opening in a month's time, so you should go and chat to them. So they introduced me, met the owners, and ultimately they said, well, why don't you come and bartend with us? If you've got time. I have nothing to do. Just got my green card. I was doing woodwork, I painting the ceiling. I kind of did some of the back bar work, helped them with the drinks menus, developed those. And so it really was like that initial insight into what that industry was like here. But I bartended for about 8 months, and I didn't really bartended much in the 20s. It was more management. But so I'm in the bar and I've got 20 seats, if you've been there. And I was chatting to this couple all night, and that's really all I did. I just talked to people for 6 hours. And this couple were great. And eventually the husband went to the restrooms. He came back and he was wax lyrical about the divider between the two men's urinals. It was this beautiful reclaimed wood divider that the artist designer of the restaurant built himself. And so he came back and he was super excited by it. And his wife was like, "You're embarrassing me. Why are you so excited by this divider?" And she was like, "Look, I'm really, really sorry, but my husband's an architect." And I was like, "Oh, interesting." And I basically said, "Look, I've always wanted to be an architect. I should have done it. Sort of regret that I didn't." And this guy was John Geronimo. And if you're familiar with John, he helped establish the UCF program here. And so he said to me, look, there's never too late. You need to talk to a guy called Frank Bosworth. He's running the University of Florida CityLab program. Talk to Frank. And the amount of times I've shared that and said, you need to talk to Frank. And I know Frank's not at CityLab anymore, but he obviously is sort of the champion, the one who sort of started it with Stephen Bender. And so just a great resource. And so really, like, that the reason I'm here today is because of the divider between the two men's urinals at Santiago's Bodega.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
So, yeah. But anyway, I did talk to Frank. So.
And now you're here.
And now I'm here.
Wow, it's amazing, like
the connection.
Yeah, you never know who you're talking to.
Exactly. Yeah. We talked. I was saying that earlier today. That you just never know. And when we talk about business development, networking, you just never know who you might bump into, but what they do, who they might know.
Yeah. It's crazy how today at the office we were actually talking about Frank, and this coworker came to me and he was like, "You guys need to interview Frank. Like he started, all this CityLab here, the program at Orlando and everything." And we kind of talked through it, and it's just so much history, so many people connected through like the path of CityLab, of UCF. And for us, it's like when we started at UCF and when we started this program, we just kind of keep seeing it growing and growing, and it's just so impressive, and this is kind of like, this podcast is also a way to like, for people to know this type of stories and how kind of everyone connects in this path. But yeah, pretty interesting. And
I spent a lot of time with Frank and Stephen, just me, and there was like two students, and like me and one other student was in the class, and so we got a very, very good one-on-one sort of
that's great.
mentoring. Yeah, it was amazing. So I think I learned a lot. Actually, I kind of owe sort of how I think about it as an architect probably a lot through Frank, and he was obviously big urban design focused and really taught me about what it means to think about a city. And so going back to being in England and Europe, you've got these big cities, but they've been built over hundreds of years, and so the experience is so much different than it is here. And we did a really good job in the 60s of kind of eroding that here. And so Frank was like, when we were learning about architecture, we just had to go right back to the foundation of our cities. And I always found that fascinating. That's kind of shaped me in the way I think about the work that we do here. So yeah, I owe a lot to Frank, I have to say. Yeah,
that's great. So after you met Frank, did you kind of came here and started studying architecture, or you kind of got into practice here in the States?
Yeah, so I did I did a little bit of internships actually as a 16-year-old in England, because I was intrigued by architecture, but I didn't practice at all in engineering or anything sort of past school. But so when I started at CityLab, I was working for a home builder. I was a purchasing agent. Really cool. And it was a big, tract homes, single family homes. It's called Taylor Morrison. And again, actually, the reason I worked there is because I met the director of architecture and construction at Santiago's bartending.
Oh, wow.
So she gave me a car. She was from England, actually. So it was like, oh yeah, come and I need somebody, come and work for me. So at Santiago's, my 8-month bartending there literally shaped everything. But so she gave me the first opportunity to get that first kind of corporate America job, and it wasn't really like design. It was more just understanding this sort of the industry to a very small degree. I learned how much a house cost as a purchasing agent, and I got more into reading plans and kind of more coordinating with our architects and things like that. But after about a year of CityLab, I didn't know I was ready for kind of the next step. But Frank was like, okay, you need to go and get an intern at an architect firm.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I was like, okay, and I'm petrified. I'm like, early 30s is my second career. I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? I'm basically, I know I'm going to have to take a pay cut. I've got this nice sort of job as a purchasing agent, earning fairly decent money. And, what does an internship look like? So having to kind of wrap my head around that was one thing, but also like, where do I start? Like, who do I want to work for? And, you kind of know some of the big architect firms in town, and I was in a class at UCF, actually. It was one of my electives, and one of the professors, Professor Tommaso, who's also
we just had Professor
You did?
Tommaso.
Yeah,
okay, so he was a professor for environmental technology for CityLab, but he also taught it at UCF, so he's teaching. And before class one day, he stands up and says, hey, we're looking for an internship at the company I work for, and I work for Little. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll, I think I'm a good student. I think,
I'll try it out.
Made a good connection with Eugene, and so maybe I'll just mention it. And he's like, yeah, just give me your portfolio and resume and things. I'm like, okay. So So I did that, and then they called me, and so I came here, and they interviewed me, and that was it. And it was a summer intern position.
Yeah.
And I will again, like going from this other job to kind of get this hourly internship was hard, but I felt so out of place. I was a bit conscious of being a bit older than a lot of interns in my position. I knew how to turn Revit on, but I was a little nervous about how I could contribute. But that was just such a great and welcoming place, and so they kind of really embraced me. And after the summer, I was like, is it possible that I could carry on? And they're like, oh yeah, that's always going to happen. I'm like, oh okay. So basically went from summer intern 2015, I think it was. And haven't really looked back. So all through CityLab, I think what's great about the program is that you understand, like, we're trying to make architects, and so what better way to learn? Like, you got your school, you learn more theory and the conceptual side of things, but then having the background of being able to work alongside that is huge. So I worked probably about 32 hours a week throughout school, and school was understanding of work, and work was very understanding about school. So it's always nice when the team was working on a deadline. I was like, sorry guys, I got to go talk to Frank. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah.
You just mentioned like already 3 people that we already know or have heard about it.
You realize the Orlando architecture community is very small.
Very
Yes.
small. Yeah.
We've noticed that throughout the years.
Yeah, we all know each other. It's good.
So what would you say, I think for the listeners, you're coming from the UK, right? And you had education over there, you kind of worked over there as well. And then you came to the US and you did the same thing, like educate yourself and work here. Like, how do you think these 2 experiences in 2 different countries, kind of what does,
how does it compare?
How does it compare for you? Have you learned something from that, or was the transition like through the path, like you learned something from that? Or
so the difference between studying in England, studying here, and working in England, working here. There's definitely a difference, but I mean, ultimately, England and America have always had culturally have always been fairly well aligned. But what I would say is that I don't know exactly why, but in England we are quite laid back, and I like to think it's that we're obviously a very old country. We've gone through a lot of hardships, and all those hardships are passed down generation to generation. So think about 2,000 years of, you remember that time that we, we had no food or whatever it was. But so I think World War II was one of those last very, very significant moments in time where everybody in England had to just sort of hunker down, get on with it, take as it comes. So, my grandparents would have been sort of in the thick of World War II, and so I look back and I regret not being able to ask them more questions about it, like what it was like to sort of live in England at that time. But I think ultimately it meant that we became like the keep calm, carry on. I'm sure you've seen that. That was World War II. And I think really that mentality has just been almost unintentionally, but passed down from generation to generation. So now we're just this fairly laid back country. We work hard-ish. We play probably harder. And so the difference really, I think, is in that kind of mindset. So when you come here, I think the mindset's slightly different. It's sort of the work environment, the corporate America kind of culture is quite, can be quite overpowering sometimes. And it's, sometimes you have to sort of take a step back and be like, well, actually life is for living and work is not, we don't live to work, we work to live. Or did I get that around? I don't know. But either way, I think so I actually didn't study very hard. I played too hard in my undergrad, but I really studied hard in my master's, and I sort of made up for it in that regard. But so studying, I think, is not that much different. But working, I think the work culture definitely is. And so I sort of almost set it upon myself to just try and create an environment here that is not laid back. I don't want us to be super chill, but just understand that the balance is there. And really we don't talk about work-life balance anymore, because it invariably in balance all the time. Like, it depends where you are in your life. So it's really about sort of, finding that there's a kind of almost a push and pull between them. And that's the balance. It's understanding when they can.
Yeah.
So, and life changes, work changes.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
And we need to adapt. I think I relate to you a lot because I did come from El Salvador. That's where I grew up. And the culture over there, like the work culture and everything, is pretty different than over here. So sometimes I do feel like you're saying, like I do need to step back, go back to my country, understand like why am I doing the things I'm doing, take those breaks as well, but kind of reflect. And I came to the US to start my career, start my life, but as well, like I need to acknowledge I have a past, I have all these experiences. I'm doing this for a reason. Sometimes we forget because we're overwhelmed with so much work and school and running around. Sure. So I think that's great.
I feel like sometimes when we think about work-life balance, we can think like, okay, 50-50, but I feel like it's never 50-50.
Yeah.
It's like,
no,
one always has more and one always has less. And then you kind of do this. And
right.
At some points you need to give more to the life, and at some points you need to give more to the work. And that's that balance of just making sure you give the time when you need the time.
Yeah. Right.
And I feel like that's hard.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And I think ultimately in the architecture career, sometimes, and what I say to sort of maybe our younger teammates, it's like, we don't want you guys working at the weekends or working at nights and stuff like that. But like, what do you want to get out of your career? Like, are there things that you really care about that maybe you might decide to invest a little bit more of your time into one of our projects, or not one of our projects, but your growth right now at this first stage of your career, the first 10 years, you don't maybe have the same, you don't have a family perhaps, or you don't have some of the other challenges in life. It's just, so it's your opportunity to maybe stretch a little bit. So that balance that might kind of tip a little bit more towards work.
True.
And as you get a little older and you start your family, so maybe your 30s, it kind of sort of shifts back towards your family, and then your family get a little older and you're like, okay, well maybe I can give a little bit back to work. So it's just constantly moving, and so it's just trying to find that right balance between, because the work-life balance has to come from your priorities in life too, right? So what you want to get out of the world we live in.
That's a really good way of seeing things.
Yeah, you can adapt through life and by the things that are happening. And so really, what inspired you to kind of come back into CityLab and start teaching? You were part of the program, you went through all of it, and then you came back, and now you have been teaching, right, for a long time.
Wait, so when you started at CityLab, was it core that you were in? Okay.
Oh, so you had to do all 4 years.
Yeah.
No, it was 3 years back then, or 3.5. I started there's an immersive studio up in Gainesville. So we did, basically did a year's worth of the course in 3 months. And it was everyday studio all day. And it was super cool, actually. It was like, for me, I was one of, I think, 4 in that immersive studio, and they were all young students, and there was me, and I rock up in my polo shirt tucked in, my satchel bag, whatever I had, and and so I was, I'm overdressed, and I feel a little out of place. And then they start with the I forget what the project was called out there. Basically the cube. It's slightly different, slightly different, but it was the same idea. And so I'm like, what am I doing here? And so for the first couple of days, I made the wrong decision, haven't I? This is not. I'm out of place. This is not for me. What am I going to do? And then I just got into it, and it was, I think, just immersing you in, and you don't have a choice. I went up there for the whole summer. I wasn't going to come back, and eventually, I think we did about 3 projects overall. And so obviously, everyone just started to expand a little bit more about your understanding of architecture. The immersive studio meant that you did materials and methods and history theory all kind of combined. So it was a really, really cool way to do it. So it's kind of a crash course. And then, so my first core studio at CityLab was Core 3, and that was with Stephen Bender. And at the time, it was quite a small program. They had about 10 students in one of the grad programs, and they only had Stephen and Frank. So he co-taught 2 studios at the same time. So it was me and my colleague Justin at the time, and then the grad class. And we basically they were my peers. I was reviewing, their work. They were reviewing ours. It was actually a very interesting way to do it. So in the end, I felt once I got to that, I could really explore hand drawing and really felt like I was was in the right place, doing the right things, and I was petrified with like all the software that I was going to have to learn. But I pushed myself, and so it was really a decision to go back to school I didn't take lightly, and I just wanted to make sure that I chose something that gave me focus. Like I knew I was going to become an architect. It wasn't if I was doing an MBA, and who knew where that was going to take me. But
that's true.
so that was the kind of the driver there. But yeah, other than that, it was just a really good experience, and CityLab is just a great place to learn as an architect because they just force you to work in a way, which Frank basically did.
So how did you come back to teach? Like, was it like a really long time after you graduated? I feel like you've been there for a while.
No, not at all. So I joke all the time, I never left. So 2015 was when I started at the start of the course. 2014 I started the course. 2015 I started working at Lowell. And so I graduated CityLab in 2017, and I think I was a good student. I was I'm not going to brag, but I was a good student. And so I think I always said to Frank and Stephen, I was like, if you ever need anyone to come back one day, I'd love to come back. It'd be great. It'd be great. I didn't think anything of it. I just maybe it was being polite, but I said, I'd love to come back. And then I think my son was born 2 months after I graduated, so August of 2017. So I'm already kind of like, okay, when am I going to get a break? Maybe 2 months of like in between school and the baby. But I think it was Stephen called me maybe right around when my son was born, and he was like, so do you want to teach studio in the fall? And I'm thinking, well, the answer should be no. Like, no, I don't. I've got a newborn baby at home. But I just thought, well, you know what? I don't know when this opportunity might come around again. And so I went back home and spoke to my wife. I was like, well, what do you think? And so she was like, well, you're going to get paid, right? So yeah, and so I think obviously at that time, just become a graduate architect, got a baby. So obviously a little extra income was not going to hurt. But I just think I've always been fascinated by teaching and coaching. As I said earlier, my dad was a maths teacher. My sister's a teacher at elementary school. So it's just always been something that, I don't know, accidentally drawn to. Like when I used to run bars and restaurants in England, I would train in our national company, all our bartenders across the country on how to do things right. So I've always just been quite
a teacher.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So it wasn't a hard decision in the end. So I obviously called Stephen back. It's like, yeah, let's do it. And so I've been teaching every year in the fall since. I don't think I could do any more than the fall. Yeah. So if Stephen's listening, just the fall.
Just the fall.
But I mean, still, you did summer because of Global Approaches. I think that's where we met you.
That was a new thing. Yeah. Absolutely. And that was cool. It was a little different, obviously. It was the summers was a slightly shortened studio, but
and it was 3 of you guys.
Yeah, and it was 3. So in theory, we could share the load a little bit. Although we tended to just kind of want to hang out with you guys. But
honestly, I feel like that class was so inspiring because of all the sustainable aspects that we had no idea that I guess existed. I feel like for me, at least, I remember, I had heard about sustainability, I heard about the AIA frameworks, but I think it was the first time I heard about regenerative design. Could you maybe explain that for our listeners as well? What does that mean in our industry?
Sure.
Like regenerative versus sustainability. That kind of comparison.
So for a while, I couldn't even say the word. Regenerative.
Me too. I struggle still.
Yeah. I'm going to try and say it now and I'm going to fail. Regenerative. No, I got it.
Oh, okay, got it.
So sustainability, what is it? It's the idea of preserving something for future generations, right?
Yeah.
So sustaining something. So what are we sustaining? When we started, when I say we, I wasn't even born, but the sustainability movement in the 70s was the right time to think about sustainability, right? It was like, okay, well, we're kind of getting more mindful of the impact that we might be having. So this is the time to make sure we're preserving what we've got, right? Unfortunately, nobody listened. Political will was all over the place. We go through recessions, priorities change. And so they put solar panels on the roof of the White House in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
Took them off in the 80s because political will, one way or the other.
Yeah.
So we were doing the right things and starting to, but ultimately we didn't do enough. So the sustainability movement, although it has had obviously a massive impact, the movement of LEED and things like that has been huge. But it's got to the point where now, what are we trying to sustain? It is what we have now, is it working? And I don't think you could really say that it is. So regenerative design is trying to go beyond sustainability. So think about sustainability as being less bad.
Okay.
So sustaining something less bad. Regenerative is good. So how do we give back? How do we make things good? And what does good look like? So regenerative design is sort of the idea that we sort of have to think a bit more holistically, and we have to think beyond a project boundary typically. So community is heavily involved in a regenerative project. We understand that our project is impacting other systems. It's all connected. And so that's the sort of the movement that we sort of found ourselves at Little when we've been an early adopter of LEED and sustainable projects for years, but I think really it's only the last sort of maybe 5-10 years that we've really started to frame our sustainability mission and talk about it more. And so that's where I think we sort of decided that, you know what, we're at the time now where we can't launch a sustainability philosophy about being less bad. Our philosophy has to be about doing more good. And that's kind of where we ended up.
I imagine that chart from class.
Yeah.
That's right.
We talked about the up and then the
Exactly.
And the flat, yeah.
So being in that middle bit, it's no longer good enough. We've got to be up
it's
in
not
there.
good enough. Yeah.
And doing good. Do you think it's hard for clients to accept that? Or like, how do you approach that conversation?
Well, we've been really, really lucky at Little that we've had clients that have pushed us. We designed the first net zero energy school in Florida in 2018. Yeah, 2018, I think it was. It's Osceola County, opened in, obviously a few years ago now. That school was a result of a couple of things. One was that the district was trying to sort of change the way they learned, so creating a new learning environment, but then also inspired by what others are doing around the country in terms of education and being good stewards of resources, good stewards of money, public money. And so it was almost the stars aligned with us as a firm. You're going to get to meet Philip Donovan very shortly, but he had a lot of experience doing net zero schools up in Virginia. And so when he came down and joined us at Little in Orlando, we had this opportunity with Osceola County. And so really, as the stars aligned, we had the opportunity to kind of really explore what it meant to do a net zero school in Florida with Osceola County. And it was an amazing experience. And that project has been sort of this ripple that we kind of refer to sort of projects sometimes as ripples at Little way. What's the lasting impact of a project? So Four Roots Farm Campus in downtown Orlando is a part of that ripple of our experience doing the net zero school. So that client was like, well, I want to do better. I want to be sustainable. I want to be net zero. I want to do all the right things. We don't know how, but we need a team that knows how to do it. They also really like the look of wood and natural materials and biophilia and connection to nature. And so really all we had to do is just kind of harness their passions, align it with ours. And so we've just been really fortunate that we've just had clients like that. And ultimately the ripple effect is just going to continue, where we're going to get more clients that are more aligned. I think we're seeing even larger potential clients who are thinking more regeneratively, and because the idea of building a project that is highly regenerative, sustainable is resilient. Like, it means that we're building buildings that are cheaper to maintain, last longer, look nicer, look like have better connections to the outside. So ultimately they're going to last longer. And that is one of the most regenerative projects a building we have to tear down.
That's so interesting, because sacred spaces, and I've seen how churches are almost like resilient. Like, they go through years and years and they're not destructive. And I feel like we've lost that touch now. With materials and just kind of like efficiency, cost. How do you see that changing in Orlando, or do you see that more of I guess, national.
So changing to more towards a more resilient future. I think it's not that we're seeing it change per se. I think the problem that we have, I think maybe we're heading in a slightly more positive direction, and then the pandemic hit, massive inflation. We're still having issues from that. So suddenly, any momentum that was building around sort of the cost or impact or ROI of doing the right thing, it just changed. So I think we're sort of trying to reset a little bit. But I do think that obviously globally there is plenty of influence and inspiration that I think the US will get back on track because I think they're going to have to, because they're going to have to keep up with the rest of the world. So unfortunately right now I don't think the US are leaders in that space, but I think we can rely on sort of smaller jurisdictions like the city of Orlando has lots of amazing goals. So we're now relying on kind of almost like grassroots to kind of pull these things up. We're relying on companies to want to do the right thing. And I think the rise of ESGs and stuff like that also, again, sort of much maligned by some over here, it means that now some lenders are actually giving more favorable interest rates to more sustainable projects because there's a value there. There's a value to doing better buildings. So we are seeing a rise in people interested in mass timber, not because it looks great, but it's zero carbon. People can tell that story about the sort of the carbon footprint, which obviously is a big deal. But ultimately, you build a building that's like that. You could either take it down piece by piece, or you leave it for the next 150, 200 years. Our default over the last 50 years is to not really think long term, and unfortunately, we need to reverse that and kind of think a little bit more about how like some of our European counterparts are approaching buildings. Like Switzerland, for example, I think it's even mandated you have to design a 100-year building.
Oh wow!
So therefore, materials and everything in between has to be more resilient to survive that long and ultimately longer. So if we can get back to that, I think that would be an amazing thing.
So mass timber, I feel like that's new here in Florida. Is it? Well, I know that you did the Fort Roots project, and that was like a very, very
that was huge.
That was huge. Like a very important step towards, I guess, the mass timber. How do you think? I guess if you could tell us a little bit more about how mass timber works in Florida, especially with like humidity or.
Okay. Yeah. So we are seeing a rise in people understanding what mass timber is. Number one. If you think about it, though, when we first started building buildings, what did we build it out of?
Wood.
Yeah, whatever was local, whatever was close by us, right? So trees. So whoever decided, I'm going to cut one of those down and I'm going to turn it into little pieces and I'm going to, build myself a house or whatever a hut and so we've been building out of wood, mass timber for centuries, all over the world, because it was the only thing that, outside of like Romans and their incredible understanding of concrete, which we're still trying to figure out, by the way. That is sustainable concrete. So we've been building out wood just because it made a lot of sense. It was probably the cheapest way to build. And so back then, our trees typically would be a lot bigger. So the pieces of wood were really, really large. So that's what we refer to as heavy timber. So big tree, big structural members.
Okay.
The reason we don't want to be doing that is because you have to cut those big trees down. And so a lot of the sort of the anti-mass timber movement was always about, well, don't you like the trees? I love trees. I would just plant trees all day if I had the choice. So at the end of the day, I think you have to start thinking a little differently about, well, can we take smaller trees, the ones that grow really fast? Can we take them? We can harvest those after 18 years, and we're typically talking regionally. We're talking southern yellow pine here, Douglas fir in the Pacific Northwest, for example. But those trees grow so quick that if you could harvest those trees, turn them into the lumber that we need to build our buildings, and then you plant more trees, it becomes a cycle that we can get behind. And so those trees are sucking in CO2 from the atmosphere. They sequester that carbon in the tree. And then once we take that, turn it into wood. So really mass timber is basically it's called short for massive timber, but you take small pieces and you combine them into structural members that work. So we want to be doing more of that, and we have much more flexibility in doing that as well. So that's the difference between what we're doing hundreds of years ago to what we're doing now. So when it comes to Florida, yes, it's relatively new. I mean, we've been, I'm sure you've been to churches, cathedrals, to Disney, and you've seen wood, structural wood. Typically, it would be a column or a beam, and it'd be glue laminated. So again, using smaller pieces, but laminating them together to form those structural members. And so that's not necessarily that new. What we're seeing more of those, like, well, what else can we do? So cross-laminated timber is something that we used on 4 Roots, and that is basically structural wall panels, structural roof panels, floor panels. And so in theory, you could build the whole building out of wood, the entire structure. And because you have more control as you're pressing those materials, pressing those 2x4s to make those panels, you do that in the shop. You can cut those out, so you can be really intentional with opening sizes, and you can have a lot more control in the shop doing that thing. So once you bring it to the site, it goes together very quickly. And so if you think about, especially these days with some of our challenges from a cost standpoint, a lot of our cost is on labor, and we don't have enough labor. We don't have enough people. So if you could shorten your construction schedule, we could limit the amount of people that we need to put a building together. That's a win-win for all of us. So that's ultimately part of the 4 Roots story, and what we're seeing across the country as well.
So when did your sort of interest in sustainability start? Was that when you started interning here at Little? Did this firm introduce that to you, or was it kind of something you were already sort of interested in?
I think sometimes sort of passions, you don't realize that sort of passions are innate in us, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think I've just always had a passion for sort of the world around us, maybe more towards sort of biodiversity and animals, and just really thinking about the planet as a whole. So I think I've always had that passion. I think really what I didn't have is a way to channel it. So growing up, like, well, what can one person do? No one thinks that they can make a difference, and that's part of the issue. Actually, is we never feel like we can make a difference, but we absolutely can. But I think really architecture and CityLab sort of channeled, obviously, me into architecture, and gave me a platform to actually talk about something that could make a difference. So it's not just me. It could be impacting anybody who uses a building, clients, owners, end users, the community as a whole. So I think the passion was always there to sort of do the right thing. And just fairly lucky and fortuitous that we've had clients who wanted to sort of to push us in that direction as well. So now I just sort of think that every project should be sort of doing the right thing. And sometimes that's not easy. You have challenges, budgets, costs, schedules, whatever it might be. People don't always think the same way. So that can be a challenge, but we just try and every project we just try and just keep moving the needle forward and keep having conversations and just try to be sort of leaders for our clients. So we're good listeners at Little. We're great designers. We're a design firm, but we came from a real kind of client-serving background. And so when you kind of put those two together, it's a beautiful thing. So we're really great listeners, and I think a lot of the time is that we allow our clients to kind of tell us what's important to them, and then we just help them get there. And I think, as I said before, I think we're just starting to see more clients who have a passion around it as well, and obviously 4 Roots is one of them.
So we want to talk a little bit about your growth during your time here at Little. I mean, you said you started here 2015, and now we're in 2026. So, can you talk to us a little bit about what your growth was going from intern and now you're a studio principal? And I think for like the three of us, we're just at the beginning of our professional careers, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are in that same point too. So I think a lot of us wonder, what is it like to sort of move up in a company, and what are those different roles that you kind of go through, and what is that experience like? How do you
prepare for that?
How do you prepare for that? I mean, these are the things we don't really learn in school. They don't teach like business development or what to do at the firm if you want to grow, but also kind of wonder, I think a lot of us wonder, what will be the role we really enjoy? And maybe we want to stop there, or do we want to keep going? Like that kind of journey of your growth. Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately starting here a Little, it's just a really good place to grow up as an architect. I think number one, I think, it's a big firm. We're about 426 people, as I learned yesterday. We've always been hovering around the mid fours for a while now, but so we're a big firm. We've got 6 offices, but we kind of still have a bit of a small firm mentality. And when you're in a smaller office of a big firm, you have the resources, but you're small and nimble and quick, and your project sort of diversity is slightly different to what it might be in one of the larger offices, for example. So as a young architect, I just got exposed to everything that we did. I got exposed to different typologies. So all the different work that we were doing across the firm, like pretty much represented here as well. But also just every step of a project too. So early design, production, working with clients, getting into construction administration, being on site, being in the field. So I think for me, especially in the stages of my life I was in, so early 30s, new career, change second career, I think I needed that. I needed somewhere where I can go in and learn a lot really quickly. And so I didn't sort of pick Little for that reason. It just happened that way. So I think, again, I was quite lucky and fortuitous. And one of the great things about our firm is that we are very people focused. And so we tend to, one of our founder, Bill Little, actually said, back in the 60s, is sort of what's in it for the other guy. And he had this big ear on his door, like this giant ear, and it was all about listening, like what's in it for the other person. And I think that reigns true for not just our clients, but for everybody a little. So we are very people focused, and what that ultimately means for career growth is that our leaders are listening. Our leaders are giving us opportunities to chart our own path a little bit as well. So starting here, I didn't know what part of architecture I really wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to design buildings. And so I just got exposed to lots of different things. I think my first project was like a nursing college. Second project was a retail bank. Third was, I think, a historic preservation down on Church Street at Ceviche, the restaurant used to be there. The thing I did an MOB. Then I did some workplace interior work and some other headquarters stuff, I think, before that, sort of in and out. So I just got exposed to lots of different things at lots of different stages of projects too. And so it kind of led me really to the point where I was quite well versed in what we were doing. Had lots of different skills, lots to learn still, obviously, and lots to develop. But I think just being a little older and being I think I was a little impatient actually too. But look, I can't sort of tread water here. I've got I'm too old, and so I just got to keep moving. And so I was, thankfully, I could sort of speak to my lead and say, look, I'm really interested in doing that type of work. There's a net zero school. I'm passionate about sustainability. I love animals, like I said. So could I be on that project team? And then ultimately, the answer was yes. So it kind of like steered me into that new studio with a new project type that we're doing down here in Florida. And so that really kind of sort of launched sort of the way I think about the work that we do, and gave me the opportunity to sort of be exposed to sort of the subsequent work after that. But then I was more corporate wide. I was office wide as a senior designer, so kind of leading design on projects, working with our design principals. So really sort of a leader across the office. And I think I got to the point where my passion, I think, lay with maybe going back to my previous life in England and leading teams of people. I was like, you know what? Like, I love the idea of sort of leading and building and designing projects and buildings everywhere, but I think I'm more intrigued about building a team more. And I could live vicariously through them a little bit. So that's what shifted me into my role now. And again, it was the same person I approached all the way along. It's like, Jim, I think I want to be a studio principal. And Jim was like, I think you'd be a great studio principal. And we figured it out. So so again, I think that the message is that, all firms are going to be a little different and unique, but some are really, really good at bringing people through. Some probably could be a little bit better, but you just got to find the right place that fits you and your aspirations, and then, hope that they care about you as much as you care about your career. And thankfully, we have that. So it's sort of a path charted. Maybe a little, it wasn't linear for me as well. So it was, sort of, I don't know if that answers your question, but it just sort of happened that way. And I couldn't ask for a better way to get there. So again, I'm kind of being exposed to all the different things. When I speak and have as a studio principal, you know, my background is maybe a little bit more design focused and maybe a little less project management focused, but I'm trying to be a better project manager for the record. So it's kind of given me a nice, actually interesting, broad spectrum of our industry. And so that's how I think, you know, a team should be thought of, is balance again.
Yeah.
So again, going back to what we were saying earlier, is sometimes I think we could push a little bit more. Sometimes we have to kind of pull back a little bit more. More design, more management, you know, whatever it might be, but there's always this kind of constant balance that we're trying to find on a project. And so I like to see myself in my role as I'm the one who tries to find the balance. Do we need to kind of pull it back? Do we need to do more? And that's kind of, I think, how I wrap my head around it all.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask, in your role, what's that balance of like doing all the business development and client stuff and still being very involved in the design process and production process of the projects that you're working on?
Okay, so what I would say is that I think the further you kind of grow in any career, I think the less of the thing that you really enjoyed you do.
Yeah.
That's not always the case for me in my role. I like to think that I'm sort of heavily involved in pretty much all the projects we do. It doesn't mean I'm drawing every day, which I love drawing. Sort of the reason I got into this, and I love being in a model. I love sort of getting into things and really sort of problem solving. That's one of my massive passions, is just trying to figure stuff out. So sometimes you have to kind of take a step back and go, well, actually, I have a team who's going to figure that out. So I'm going to sort of just give them the platform and the environment to do that, and I'll be there if they need me. I think it also depends on the type of projects and sort of if it's a new client or a new typology or something a little unique that maybe I need to be involved a little bit more, and maybe I can trust the team to kind of manage and lead in other projects. And so it requires you to get to the point where you build trust with everybody around you, your team, your immediate leaders and things. And once you get to that point, everything becomes a lot more straightforward. And so I think at this point in time, it's that we've got a great team. Like, we have multiple offices, we have multiple practice areas. I've got a large team of resources to pull from. And so we just found a really good way of kind of coping with because we've been really busy over the last sort of year, and it's been amazing. But I've managed to be a little bit more selective with the type of work that we do. So that's kind of, I guess, the way I've survived it.
I think part of this podcast too, what's interesting for us, and hopefully for our listeners too, is to kind of be able to compare the different roles that happen throughout firms, because us young, professionals, we don't really understand or know kind of what all those different roles entail. And on top of that, it's different in all firms. There's some people who, when they're studio leaders, they're doing more of that business development stuff and not so much of the design stuff. So I think that's really interesting. I know for me, I feel like I like both.
Yeah.
Like a balance of the managing and the organization, but also like being involved with projects.
Yeah. And I think, you brought up, like, you touched on the business development sort of piece to it too. I mean, we are a business. It's a vocational career. In England and other places, it's even more so. So there's actually less money in architecture in England. There was never a consideration why I became an architect here and not there, by the way, but apparently they don't get paid very well. So it's clearly I'm not going to go back and become an architect in England. But it is very vocational. We put a lot of ourselves into things, but the business side to it, as you said earlier, like, we don't really learn that at school. I think we have one class, professional practice, towards the end where you learn a little bit about how firms work, and every firm is slightly different. But ultimately we're here to design and build buildings, but we can't turn the lights on if we can't turn a profit. So we just have to be mindful. So again, it goes back to this balance thing where we want to be really, like, we want to invest so much into a project in our clients and design, but we also have a fee that we have to think about, and time that's associated, and we have other projects to balance as well. So it's just a constant. I actually like all of it. I quite like the numbers part of things. Again, the role that I play as a studio principal means that I'm pretty much the kind of like the one of the ones who is exposed to all. You have to you have to know how to put buildings together and learn and design and mentor teammates and then make a profit and win more work and really the best business development is just doing really well in projects with your current clients. So that's the first step. And then the next one is sort of trying to build your network. And I think that's a lifelong thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Also part of that balance, like for us as students who are practicing and we're trying to pursue the license too, you know, and a lot of people who we've talked to, I think most, if not all people that we've talked to, kind of asking for advice on like, how can we grow our career? It's always, well, the license is so important. Like if you really want to go far, the license is huge. So for you, did you like, because I know CityLab, I don't know if back then, like they didn't have iPal or anything like that. So were you thinking about the license while you were still in CityLab studying, or did you kind of leave that for after you?
I did leave it, but iPal actually started, I think, the year after I left. So there was, CityLab had just signed up. So there was the opportunity to start taking some exams, I think. But it was right in my thesis. So I was like, well, probably not going to happen. But I do think licensure is important. It's one of those things that the way I talk to anybody who's sort of pursuing it is don't like when you're in studying mode at school and then you shift to work mode, it's going to be very easy to kind of forget how to be a student again.
Yeah.
And for me, I kind of had 11 years between my undergrad and my master's. So I absolutely forgot how to be a student. Thankfully, I was a really bad student in my undergrad and a pretty good student in my master's, so I forgot all the bad things. It's probably a good thing. But so when I graduated, I said to myself, I was like, well, my son's going to be born, so give me a couple of months, let me figure out what that means. But I was studying from ARE with a little baby, learning to like walk around the table, and so I got pictures of me studying in the Ching book, and he's like looking at it, and so I just sort of said to myself, I'm just going to knock these out. I'm going to force myself to do it. I'm going to study hard. And my strategy was like book an exam, and just race towards it. And as soon as you get through it, and hopefully you pass, you book the next one for like 3 weeks out. And so you go again. And so all I did for about 4 months was study and take exams. And I passed every single one apart from the last one. And the last one, you have to wait 2 months before you can take the next one. So that was a pain, because I was doing really well. And it's really just being disciplined and just and not being scared about them. I think you guys work, right? So you're exposed to the industry already. The exams are not trying to teach you how to be an architect in a way. They're trying to teach you how to, well, sort of pass a test in some ways, but they're trying to give you a broad spectrum of everything you do as an architect. So you're never going to know every single detail. I never expect us to, and we're always learning. But I think it's a framework to kind of understand how architects work. So who do we need to know from a structural standpoint? How do we kind of make sure we understand site work? And so we are the one in the middle of our project. So we should be, but we're not necessarily expected to know how the mechanical system might work. We need to be well versed in it, but we don't need to know every single detail. That's why we have consultants. So in a way, don't be daunted by it. I would just be aggressive and go for it. And if you say, well, I'm going to study and then I'm going to book my test when I feel like I'm ready, I just don't think you never feel like you're ready. I guarantee every single one I took, the night before I was like, this is not going to go very well. I'm not ready. But somehow I just managed to get through them. The last one I didn't, and I had to wait 2 months. So I came back and I took again, and I used black spectacles for the last one and that was actually very good. It gave me a really good, well-rounded sort of experience for that last exam again. But yeah, so just go for it.
Just go for it.
Yeah.
But being licensed is important. And I think working when you start in your careers, I think what I would say is don't put too much pressure on like the sort of architect that you want to be or the type of work you want to do. I think just being exposed as much as you can. Obviously, we have that spectrum, the kind of the typical design architect. You've got your project manager type, and then you've got someone in the middle who's your quintessential project architect who just knows how to put buildings together and the details. We all used to just be that, right? Back in the day. Frank Lloyd Wright was your project architect, but he was also the master builder. We didn't have GCs back then, so you knew how to put buildings together. They literally did it. So now our industry has changed. We've given a lot of responsibility away to other people. So, but that role is still massively important and sometimes overlooked, with the two other sides, design and management. But what I would say is if you can kind of spend your first 6 years of your career trying to be exposed to those three things, and then ultimately you get to the point where something becomes more logical for you. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I really, really like the business side of things, and leading clients and making sure the team has everything they need. And I love design, but this is me. And so you just naturally might migrate over there a little bit. But at the end of the day, we're all designers. We're all part of the same design team. We all collaborate together. But a good team just has diverse roles. And that's why I think it ends up being siloed a little bit. But so it can be good or bad, depending who you talk to. But it's just important to be exposed as much as possible, and hope that your skills and what you enjoy, you're kind of aligned with what you end up doing.
Yeah.
You have to enjoy what you do at the end of the day.
So to wrap up, we want to ask you, for you, what's a piece of advice that you want to share with our listeners, whether they're students, professionals, or that maybe a piece of advice you heard throughout your education or your career that kind of stuck with you, that you can kind of give back to us and our listeners?
All right. So I didn't prepare anything in advance. So I don't know. I think advice there's a couple of things. I think just grabbing something, like if you really want to do something, don't be afraid to ask. I think if we can be a little passive sometimes and just see where things take us. And again, if you're in the right place, if you're working for the right group of people, the right firm, the right team, the right leaders, at the end of the day, they kind of want you to take a little ownership of your career. And it's your careers. We get one shot at it ultimately. And so I think the biggest thing that I would, from my experience, especially kind of coming into this a little later, is like I couldn't afford to sort of be treading water and sort of floating around a little bit. I just had to be a little, not aggressive, that's the wrong word, but intentional, forceful. So if I ever felt I was going off track, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm heading in the right direction. It's like I immediately I sort of consulted with one of my leaders. I was like, look, I'm not sure if this is going in the right direction. What do you think? And ultimately, I've just had really good sort of mentorship along the way. And so I think that is probably the big thing. It's just it's your career. Like do what you want to do. Don't be afraid to ask for an opportunity, but you also have to earn it too. So I think work hard, do the right things, invest. This career is about investing a bit more of yourself. It ultimately is. So if you show that investment in people and your projects and your clients, and you have a good work ethic, when you do go and ask, it's a very easy conversation.
Yeah. I think that's great advice.
That is really good advice
for a lot of us too. So
take initiative as well.
Yeah, taking initiative, advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
Advocate for yourself. Exactly.
Well, Pete, thank you so much for sitting with us. It was great to hear your story and to hear your journey. And I'm sure for us, the advice will stick for sure. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's been great.
Yeah.
Do I get to do another one?